This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
In the early morning hours of June 18, 1982, in St. Louis County, Missouri, a driver notified police that they had witnessed a car accident. According to the witness, a silver and black 1981 Ford Futura had been driving the wrong way in the westbound lane, and it had gone down the embankment on I-270, 130 feet west of Old Halls Ferry Road. The car had crossed a grass median and struck a concrete median barrier where it came to rest. Given the time of day, police responded to the single-car accident, possibly expecting to find a drunk driver behind the wheel. But when they arrived at the scene sometime around 4 a.m., they found that the driver of the car was dead. Police identified the driver as 20-year-old Daniel W. King, a county resident. The police noticed fresh blood on the right side of his body, but no closer investigation was done, and his body was sent via ambulance to the coroner's office. Within an hour, the coroner called police and told them that the cause of death was gunshot wounds, and warned police that they needed to rope off the accident scene and treat it as a crime scene. The body, the car, and other possible evidence had already been compromised, but detectives headed to the scene and began to investigate the crime. King had been shot a total of 3 times in the chest, side, and arm. The weapon was a .22 caliber handgun, and robbery didn't seem to be a motive, as the victim's wallet with cash inside it were found in the car. Detectives arrived at the scene just after 5 a.m. and carefully studied the area where the car had come to rest. They noted that the Ford Futura had damage to the left side of the vehicle, the same side that was resting against the concrete median. The car was facing east, and there was mud underneath and on the sides of the car. Glass from a shattered window was inside the car, and the trunk was ajar. It was when the police began to look at the events leading up to the crash that a mix of unanswered questions, eyewitness accounts, and possible suspects would come together and turn this case into a puzzling mystery, which remains unsolved to this day. Daniel King, or Danny as he was known to family and friends, was only 20 years old, but he seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. He was a newlywed and had only 3 days before become a father. He had a good job as a union pipe fitter. With so much going for him and no criminal history, Danny didn't seem like the type of person that would wind up being the victim of such a seemingly random and violent act. Danny was the son-in-law of a St. Louis County Circuit Court judge, so it would seem like all the stops would be pulled out to solve Danny's murder, and to determine if Danny was killed by a stranger or someone he knew. Despite being a busy guy with so much going on, Danny found time to unwind. Being an athlete in high school, Danny stayed active in sports and played softball at the time of his death. Only hours before he was murdered, Danny had played in a softball game after visiting his wife and baby daughter at the hospital. After the game, Danny headed out for drinks with some of the players and then wound up driving 2 friends home, dropping the second one off at his house at around 2 a.m. About 2 hours later, at just before 4 a.m., the eyewitness to Danny's car accident would make the phone call to police. It should have taken Danny about 11 minutes to drive from his friend's house to where his body and car were found. Yet it apparently took him almost 2 hours to get there. Where had Danny been during that 2-hour period? Once police worked back to the time around the murder, and in the previous days, they discovered some disturbing incidents and suspects that may or may not be related to Danny's murder. A few days prior to the murder, police had received reports of a dark or maroon car, possibly a Lincoln Continental, firing shots at another vehicle, very close to where Danny would later be found dead. The shots were fired in the early morning hours around 2 a.m. A man told police that he had been driving when the Lincoln began to tailgate him. At one point, the driver of the Lincoln pulled alongside him and raised a handgun up where the victim could see it. The victim slowed down to let the Lincoln go by, but instead, the driver started to play games with the victim and kept close to him. Fearing that he might be in danger, the victim made a sudden turn to get off the highway and away from the Lincoln. It was then that he heard gunshots that wound up striking his car. Due to the Lincoln driver firing shots for no apparent reason into another car, and since it was so close to the day and location where Danny was killed soon after, police wanted to find the driver of that car to question him in Danny's murder. The suspect was described as being white, in his 20s or 30s, and being on the tall side with dark curly hair. It wasn't long before police identified the driver of the Lincoln as a 22-year-old local man with a criminal history. They arrested him for shooting at the driver in the incident in the days before Danny's murder. Although they had no physical evidence or witness linking the man to Danny's murder, it's clear that police suspected he may have been Danny's killer. This man's name and face were plastered on local TV and in newspapers. It was at this point that an eyewitness came forward to tell police that he had seen the most likely suspects in Danny's murder, and that the 22-year-old man that the police were eyeing up as a possible shooter was not the man he saw. The eyewitness had been reluctant to come forward because his wife had implored him not to get involved, but the man told her, "That is not the man I saw on the side of the road," and he felt he needed to call police to let them know what he had witnessed. The eyewitness, a truck driver, had driven by Danny's car shortly before he was found murdered. He claimed that Danny's car was parked on the side of the road behind a dark car, possibly Chevy. As the witness drove by, he noticed a very attractive blonde woman in a tan outfit standing near the cars. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a bun, but hung down in the back. The truck driver slowed down to see what was going on, almost coming to a stop. It was then that he noticed a man walking out of the weeds on the side of the road. He described the man as having slicked back hair and wearing a dark sport coat. He even noticed that the man appeared to be slightly pigeon-toed as he walked. However, the truck driver did not see Danny and continued past the scene. The truck driver called police and recounted what he had seen, but after that, police never followed up with him again. There's no way to know what insight this witness could have given investigators. But he was adamant that the 22-year-old that was arrested in the other shooting incident was not the man he had seen with the blonde woman near Danny's car. This witness has since passed away, so this may have been one of the biggest missed opportunities for investigators in Danny's case. 36 years later, Danny King's case remains unsolved, and there are more questions than answers. The only suspect police closely considered was never arrested in Danny's murder, and went on to serve time for other unrelated crimes. The best witness to the crime was not properly questioned, nor was the couple he saw identified. When Danny's life ended on that dark stretch of highway in 1982, the murder had long-lasting effects on those around him. Danny King's wife became a young widow, and she was left alone to raise a baby girl who was robbed of the chance to ever know her father. Danny's parents and siblings were forced to come to terms with a beloved family member being stolen from them, and to wonder why Danny had died. This case has so many components and possibilities, and Danny's younger brother Jim talked with me about the family struggle over the last 36 years to find justice for Danny.
If you love smash burgers, the crispy edges, bold, beefy flavor, you need to try Omaha Steaks' all-new smash burgers. They're pre-smashed, made with 100% extra-aged beef, and grill-ready. No mess, no griddle. I tossed a few on the grill last weekend, straight from freezer to bun in just 5 minutes. The sear? Perfect. The flavor? Rich, juicy, and seriously next level. Way better than anything I've had from the store. Plus, I grabbed the Built for the Grill pack at omahasteaks.com/smash and scored 16 smash burgers free. With high-quality meats always on hand, I'm already eyeing my next order. Maybe there's steak burgers or that killer bacon-wrapped filet. Family-owned since 1917, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of premium quality delivered right to your door. Smash burger lovers, this is your moment. Get ready to smash expectations with new Omaha Steaks smash burgers. Visit omahasteaks.com/smash and order the Built for the Grill pack with 16 free smash burgers. That's 16 free Omaha Steaks smash burgers at omahasteaks.com/smash. See site for details.
Jim, welcome to the show. I appreciate you talking to me about your brother Danny's case. And this one really seems like a puzzling one, because on one hand, it seems like there's a good suspect in reading through the materials, but on the other hand, there's a witness that sort of discounts that suspect. So I can only imagine how frustrating your brother's murder must have been for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that were frustrating. From that standpoint, I think the most frustrating part is they came to us, in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, your brother, your son to my parents was killed in a car accident. That's shocking enough. He's 20 years old, just married, had a 3-day-old baby. That's sad enough. And then the police come back to our house 3 hours later and say, oh, we made a mistake. It wasn't a car accident. He was shot 3 times. So if you can only imagine that feeling, and then ramp it up 3 hours later that he was shot, it's, to say the least, it's a crazy situation.
So it's sort of like getting the news a second time.
Yeah, absolutely. Second time and worse.
Yeah. And your parents were around at the time too. They heard that news, and I can only imagine they were devastated by that.
Yes, I was only 16, so I was living at home, going to high school, and lived with my parents. So I remember when the police came to the house and told them, about the so-called car accident, and then they came back, 3 hours later and told them about that. I mean, I think it was they were in a state of shock at the time, and I think really for a long time, I think even for months and even into years, they were in a state of shock over the whole situation.
And your brother was 20, and you were 16 at the time. Were you guys close?
Yeah, we were close. I mean, we grew up fairly close. And then as we got older, obviously, I was still in high school, and he was out and he was working his job. He was a apprentice pipe fitter working on, building buildings and things like that. So we weren't as close once he got out. But, we were much closer as we went to school together, went to the same high school together and things like that. So, yeah.
So one thing in addition to Danny's daughter, being left without a father, is his young wife is a widow at this point, after he was murdered. Tell us about her experience.
Yeah, I can't even imagine it. And his wife, Colleen, we were friends with them since we were born. Since we were young kids, our parents were friends with them, and we've known them forever. And I can't even imagine being 19 years old, being in the hospital, and your parents and your in-laws come tell you got a 3-day-old baby there, and come tell you your husband's been murdered. And I can't even imagine what goes through your mind as far as, what happened? How am I going to take care of this baby? I got to get a job. I mean, just probably everything floods through your mind that is kind of unfathomable for most people. So, I got to give her credit. She raised a great daughter, and she got her nursing degree later on in life, and she's been remarried, has three more boys with her current husband, and she's really come back from that. But I know for a while it was a struggle for her just to kind of come back from that, I think, and kind of wrap her head around everything. And at 19, 20, 21 years old to take care of all that and take care of a young daughter and stuff was tough. But she's, I think it tells a lot about her wherewithal and who she is. And so she's done incredibly well to be where she's at today.
So she didn't even really have a chance to grieve because she's got to take care of this brand new baby that she's got.
Absolutely. And I don't even know if she probably even looks at it that way or looks any different. It was just time for her to, raise the baby. She had plenty of family members and friends and stuff to help her, but still as the sole caregiver for this baby, I think you're right. I think she didn't have much time. It was just like you're called right into duty. I mean, even being 19 years old, I think at this day and age is young to be a parent, and now being a single parent and everything that comes along with that. And, it had to be tough. I can't even imagine, but she did incredibly well to do what she did.
And how long were they married for?
They were married for about a year, and so not very long. They dated forever. High school, grade school. I think they started dating even grade school. They were lifelong friends, grade school, high school, and then dated after high school, and then got married and had their baby. And so they knew each other for a long time, dated for a long time, and everything kind of came crashing down.
And that's just another sad part of the case. Although he was 20, it seemed like he really had a level head. He had a good job. He just got married, like you mentioned, just had a baby. If you can, tell us, who he was, what kind of things he was into.
Yeah, he was he was an athlete. He played soccer and baseball in high school and stuff, and he was a fiery guy. He liked in sports and stuff. He got fired up, and But I think the biggest thing for him in his life, and I remembered when he had his daughter. I mean, that was the most exciting time for him. He was, even being 20, you're really young and pretty immature at that time. But he was so excited to have a new baby, and I mean, he was just bragging to everybody that he had a baby. He was so excited, and I mean, that was just a huge part of his life. And even at a young age, he was extremely excited.
So it sounds like he was doing all the right stuff, not getting in trouble. Was he ever involved in anything that could be dangerous or lead to, a run-in with somebody that, was the wrong crowd or anything like that?
Well, and that's what I've looked into a lot as well too, and anything that I found, even talking to his friends and everything else. I mean, never had an arrest or anything for any kind of no arrest or run-ins with the law or anything like that, and even any kind of run-ins with any type of people that would do any kind of harm like this, that I know of. I mean, obviously there always could be some hidden stories somewhere, but from the friends that I know of his that I'm close with as well too, and the people that I talk to, I haven't heard of anything.
So when they came back and told you, that not only did he die, but unfortunately he's murdered, that shocks your family. What were your initial thoughts? Did you think that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was involved in something? What were your thoughts as far as that whole thing?
At 16, I look back and I'm not even sure at that time. Like, wow, I mean, that was back in 1982, and there wasn't as much gun violence as there is now. I mean, if somebody was killed or shot at now, I think it's you hear that about in the news 5-10 times a day. Back then you didn't hear as much, and I think that was even more rare back then, I thought. And I remember thinking that, but I just remember thinking, wow, that's I mean, just so unbelievable that I think it was hard to wrap my head around, like, why would somebody do that? And I think I even thought back then, wow, I mean, who carries a gun? There weren't many people that had guns and carried guns back then like they do now. So I think that was really a shock of the whole thing.
And one of the things about the crime scene, and I know you've looked into it and studied it probably more than anybody, but it's a little bit confusing about the layout of the accident scene versus where he was shot and where his car wound up being witnessed, winding up there. If you can, sort of walk us through the events as you understand them, or as police told you, how they unfolded and how Danny's car wound up where it did.
Yeah, I think we're pretty clear now of how things happen. I mean, he dropped two friends off about 2 o'clock in the morning at their house. He got on the highway, and it was a short stretch of highway, maybe a mile and a half on the highway between where he got on the highway until where he pulled over. So he pulled over on the side of the highway, and a car had pulled over in front of him. And doing a lot of this research and things like that, I'm like, you think about that for a second. Why would you pull over if you were somebody? Ask anybody this question. Why would you pull over on the side of the highway? It's 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. His car was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Why would you pull over on the side of the road? And if you could pause for a second, you go, everybody that I've ever asked that question is the same answer always comes up. You only pull over on the side of the road, basically, is if you know somebody's waving you over that you know, or that you see somebody on the side of the road that needs help that you know. I mean, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to pull over on the side of the road for no reason. You're going to keep on going. So my thought and my gut feeling is that he knew who it was. And I think that's the feeling in general. So he pulled over. The other car that was there pulled in front of him. And then the person or persons in the car in front of him got out of their car. I don't know all the details right there, got out of their car, came up to the passenger side window as he's pulled over on the shoulder and shot 5 times into the car, hitting my brother 3 times. And as they're shooting, my brother put his car in reverse and started backing back down the highway. He's going the wrong way, backing up down the highway. And then as he's got 3 bullet holes in him, so I'm sure he wasn't all that coherent and things. So he backed into the center median, and that's where his car landed about 100 yards back down the road in the center of the highway against the median, and that's kind of where his car ended.
So he was witnessed, if I'm not mistaken, sort of going the wrong way down the freeway. Is that correct?
Yeah, the wrong way backwards. And there was over 10. This is probably the most amazing part. One of the most amazing parts of the whole case. There was 10 passerbyers that had called into the police that day and said, "Hey, I saw this car going backwards down the highway. It pulled right in front of me, cut in front of me." Different things that saw different things there as well too, in front of them. And the amazing part is none of these were followed up with. And probably the most amazing part is there was a truck driver that gave a very detailed definition of what he saw. And I kind of laugh about this a little bit, because in his description, when he called into the police, and he said, I saw on the side of the road, I saw this beautiful blonde-haired woman on the side of the road by these two cars. So I thought, boy, she might need some help. I'm going to pull over and help her. So he's driving in a big 18-wheeler truck. So I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said in the interview. He's gearing down his truck to slow down, and he slowed down to about 5 miles an hour right in front where these two cars are, one being my brother's and one being the other car. And he saw the female there, and he gave a very vivid description of the female. Blonde hair, her hair's pulled back almost like a bun, but it's very long in the back, what kind of outfit she had on. And he said as he got closer, he saw this woman, and then he saw a male come out of the weeds. You're on the shoulder of the road, so he saw a male come out of the weeds right there, and he kind of was maybe 5'9", 5'10", kind of stocky, pigeon-toed, had like a sport jacket on, a vest, nice slacks on and stuff, and then they jumped in the car and took off. I mean, he was very close to the scene, probably within 15, 20 feet of these people, and described these two people who 99.9% these two people are the killers, and described it to the police and called in, and the police did zero follow-up with this person at all. They just took the information and did not follow up with him at all.
And that went on for a while to where they didn't follow him up. Then did anybody voice their concerns that he wasn't followed up with?
No, nobody followed up with this person at all. And when I looked back into this not too long ago, kind of reopened the case, unfortunately this witness has passed away since then. But the description he gave, I can say this, if this description was given at the time of the murder, and they, usually nowadays if that type of description is given, they have a, sketch artist or whatever it is, put that on the newspapers, on media outlets. They have a description of that. That case would have been solved, I believe, in 1 day or 2 days, because I think they would have known who those people were that were on the side of the road that looked like that. The guy had a description of the car, and the police basically, for a lack of a better word, just ignored that information and did nothing with it.
And what kind of description did he give of the actual car? Do you know what that was?
He gave a description of the car, and again, I don't mean to laugh at this part, but he said, the truck driver said, I was so focused on this beautiful blonde that he goes, I wasn't really looking at the car, but he said it was a later model car. So this is 1992, or 1982. He said it was a late model Chevy, because you can tell by the long tail lights. And back in those days, the Chevrolets had the long horizontal tail lights in the back. So he said it was a dark green or black late model Chevy with the long horizontal tail lights in there. So that's really all the information that he had, because then when he pulled up, the car just, he was like at 5 miles an hour. They jumped in the car and they took off and sped off, and that was it.
So the witness that saw this man and this woman on the side of the road was a truck driver, and he went into pretty good detail about what he saw. And can you share with us exactly what he described?
Exactly. He was even a little hesitant to call in to the police, but when he saw on the news that they were trying to basically pin this on another guy who was a tall, curly-headed person, he basically said to the police, "That is not the person I saw on the side of the road. I was within 15 feet who I saw on the side of the road, and that it was not a tall, skinny, curly-haired guy. He described what he saw on the side of the road as a very beautiful young blonde, maybe young 20s, a young blonde that had a tan outfit on. She had her hair pulled back, almost like when they used to pull it back to be in a bun, but then it was really long in the back. And then the male that came out of the weeds, which I described before, wore a dark sport coat, vest, and tan pants. And I always think, looking back there, let me step back a little bit. It wore tan pants, and then he said, I even thought the truck driver said the man came out, looked like he was even pigeon-toed and had slick back hair. So if whoever's listening to this, or maybe in that area knew of anybody, can think of a couple, a male and a female, maybe young 20s, that fits that description. I think back in that time, there weren't a lot of people that ran around in suits and sport coats. So I think it might give a good description of somebody that they could come forward and call in a tip to the tip line that we'll give later. I think this is excellent information that should have at the time definitely helped solve this, but I think it can still help at this time.
And maybe somebody will remember somebody like that fits that description.
Absolutely. I think people at that time may have been a little bit afraid to call in, but I think that's such an excellent description of two people that were together. A blonde-haired woman, another guy kind of shorter, stocky, pigeon-toed, wore like a suit. I think that's a pretty good description of somebody that somebody might say, well, I remember those people. They always used to dress up and dress really nice, and I remember her. She was a good-looking blonde. That may ring a bell to somebody.
And so at this point, there's a suspect that just the day before your brother was killed actually had shot at somebody, and one could make a case that perhaps he was involved because it happened right in that area the day before. But at the same time, that truck driver's description seems to go away from that guy. In your gut feeling, what's your take on that suspect?
Well, and absolutely, and the amazing part about this, just 24 hours prior, this suspect shot at another car, and this was within 150 feet of where my brother was shot. And you would say, well, that's just an easy suspect. This guy must have done the same thing. And I was always thinking, I think the police led us to believe, okay, we researched this guy. We don't have any evidence on him, but it's got to be him. We basically put him in jail for your brother's murder. We don't have any evidence on him, but, he's going to jail for this. So we've kind of wrapped it up. We don't have any evidence on him. But the funny thing is I had a hard time always believing, okay, this guy shot somebody at one place, and he's going to go back to the exact same location 24 hours later and shoot at somebody again. I know they always say criminals usually get caught because they're dumb, but I just can't believe that somebody's going to do that exact same thing. And the description this truck driver gave, the reason why he called into the police with this description is because the description of this suspect, who they say killed my brother, the description of the suspect is a tall, skinny man with curly hair. And this truck driver said, well, the guy that I saw on the side of the road right there was like just the opposite of this, 5'9", stocky, pigeon-toed. So that was not this guy. So that's why he called in and said that was not the guy that I saw on the side of the road that you're saying did this. It is not him. So he called in, and actually this truck driver called in against his wife's advice. His wife said, don't get involved, and he said, I need to, because the guy that did this murder on the side of the road was not the curly-haired guy they're saying who did it. And so, I've actually spoken to that witness, or spoken to that suspect myself about a year and a half ago, and and I actually spoke to his girlfriend as well too at the time about the case, and I still get a feeling. I mean, anybody can lie to you at any time, but I still get a strong feeling that it wasn't him.
So this is a big fail on the police department's, on their end to not follow up this witness, and now they can't speak to him even if they wanted to.
Absolutely. I think the sad part is they didn't follow up on him, and that's, I asked the police sergeant that's in there now, and the police sergeant, I said, how do they not follow up on any of these 10 leads? And he goes, they got 10 leads. He said, you're lucky now if something happens and you get 1 or 2 people that see something. He goes, you never get people coming forward. And back then, you had 11 people coming forward to say they saw something, and they followed up on none of them. He goes, that's unbelievable. And this is a quote from the police sergeant that was that's in there now. He's a young guy. He wasn't even alive when my brother was killed. And he basically told me, he goes, I looked over your brother's case, and he told me, he goes, I don't know how they did things back then, but we don't do things like that anymore. And he told me, I can't, I'm saying exactly what he said. I don't know what he meant by that, but he just said, we don't do things like that anymore. And, he didn't elaborate that on anymore, but I'll leave it at that.
And were there any other things that you felt they might have mishandled along the way?
Oh, absolutely. I think a number of things are, they didn't follow up on those witnesses, and I think that one of the other key things is the people they interviewed. I mean, in Detective School 101, even though I never attended that, you go, okay, when somebody dies, you go back to the family members, the closest kin, the friends, and then you go back to where the murder victim was that night. You interview, all the people that were there and just see if they saw anything, heard anything, whatever. And they basically did none of that. I was never interviewed. My sister, who's a year older than me, actually hung around my brother a lot during those years, was never interviewed. My brother's 2 best friends were never interviewed. My parents were never officially interviewed, on a basis, and they only interviewed a handful of people that were even there the night where he was playing softball and out at the bars that night. They only interviewed a handful of people, and that was it. And it's almost like I almost feel like the police chose and selected the people they interviewed to make it easy on them, and then they ended that. So they very real. I mean, I think if they would have interviewed family members or close friends, and like the question you asked earlier, did he have any run-ins with anybody? They would have said, he had a couple run-ins with, maybe my sister's old boyfriend here and there and things like that. Those things would have came out, and they would have done some different interviewing, but they never, believe it or not, interviewed family members, best friends, or even hardly any of the people that were there that night.
And that's typically who they start out interviewing, because it's easier to build a circle of, who's around that person and work their way out from there.
I mean, that's like going to, say, Detective School 101. That's the first thing you do, and they didn't. And I think there's reasons. I think there's reasons why they didn't do that. And I think the police were influenced that time by outside forces, outside people. And at that time in St. Louis, that was in the late 1970s, 1980s. That was St. Louis was a time where there was heavy, how should I say, organized crime, and there was some battling going on between organized crime with bombing of cars and shooting family members that are involved in organized crime. And I think some of the organized crime had some influence on the police on what they were doing and who they interviewed, and that's why they chose not to. I mean, there's some deeper reasons why they didn't.
And just one thing I wanted to go back on, you had brought it up, the things that he was, Danny was doing that night. He was at a softball game, then he wound up, on the side of the road. Was there some missing time in between, those 2 points where they couldn't account for? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So he went to played softball. They all, after the softball game, they all went to the Pipe Fitters Local 562, where he was a member of. They played softball there. They played softball. They went to the bar that was a bar restaurant that's on the property there. That closed at 11:30. They went to a house that's owned by one of the union members right there on the property. They went there and hung out and drank beers and stuff till about 1:30 or so, and then he dropped two of his close friends off about 8 miles away, and between 2 o'clock and about 3:30 in the morning, they don't know where he was or what he did or anything like that. There's really no record of where he was. But just to back up a minute, to show you a little bit more, so he dropped two friends off, the last two people to see him. They did interview one of them,
And the poor kid, I mean, he was 20 years old, and I think he was in shock for a long time. He was the last person to see my brother, and he was his good friend, and he was in shock, I think, from the situation, which I don't blame him. But the other guy that they dropped off, he was never interviewed ever by the police or even up to this moment. I just talked to this guy about 3 months ago, and he said the police never contacted him about interviewing him about anything. And to this day, I can't believe that, the last two people that my brother saw before he, was killed were the one kid was interviewed and the other one was never even interviewed by the police.
So these are all things that you've been checking off the list and sort of doing your own sort of investigation with for the last 35 years. How do you keep yourself going? What makes you, stay motivated to do this for your brother 35 years later?
I don't know if it's justification for him. I think it's more justification for probably more for my parents and more for his daughter. And being a parent myself, I've got 3 kids, and I can only imagine that you lose your not only a child, your firstborn, and you lose a child. And I see how it affected my parents back then and all through the years, and it still is still fairly raw with them even now. 36 years later, it's still raw for them for this situation, how it went down, how it was handled, just everything. And I think, they're almost 80 years old, and I think it may bring some type of closure and justification for them. So I think that sometimes kind of keeps you going, and it's a lot of time consuming, and it's a lot of work just to follow up on people and find out where people are and talk to people and stuff. But you start putting pieces together, and things start making sense. Yeah, no, one of the things I was going to say in St. Louis County, this is almost unbelievable and sad. In St. Louis County, as big as St. Louis County is, the cold case department in St. Louis County is 1/2 of one detective. So it's one part-time detective working on all cold cases, and that includes rape, armed robbery, and all murders that are cold cases in the county of St. Louis.
Wow. And how many cold cases do they have?
Yeah, it's got, we have 250 murders every year. And if you think of how many rapes and armed robberies go unsolved every year, and that's over the last, 30, 40, 50 years. And so it's hundreds of them. And so you got one guy that's working 2.5 days a week.
Wow. That's unfortunately, that's something that I see a lot of across the country. Different departments are understaffed, and they don't have the resources, and the fresh stuff that has a better chance of being solved gets pushed to the front of the line. And unfortunately, cases without witnesses, without evidence, they sort of get moved to the back, the back of the line, and that's unfortunate. Not fully investigating it, and one of the things you've done is you have a Facebook page up about Danny's case. Tell us a little bit about the Facebook page and where people can find it.
Yeah, the Facebook page is called Danny King 1982 Unsolved Murder. There's some photos on there, and he's got the daughter he had that was 3 days old when he was killed. Now is married. Molly is married. She's got 2 sets of twins. So she's got 4 kids, married, great husband, great kid. She's a nurse, and she's doing really well. And we see her, on a regular basis, and she's part of the family, just like anybody else. And so she's done really well.
And I think that's one of the saddest parts when I, read through this case and heard from you about it, was just the fact that Danny missed out on that entire joy of being a father, and not just that, but his daughter missed out on knowing her dad. How's she doing? How did she, you mentioned she's a nurse and she's has a family now of her own. How has she taken it over the years, that she lost her father in this way without ever really getting to know him?
Yeah, I think it's been tough on her. I think when she was younger, it was tough on her. I think now she's more like, I really like to see some type of justice, and now looking into this to see what has happened in this case and how the injustice and how really not much was done, if anything, to solve this. And just to see this is really, gotten her fired up as well too. Like, hey, let's work on this and let's try to figure something out, because it's, it's so unjust, and the whole thing is just so sad, and really the amount of work that the police have put into this, and the police have actually put up some roadblocks even to us throughout this process over the years, and I think she feels like she wants some justice done for her dad as well. So,
well, I definitely hope for her sake and for yours and the rest of your families that somehow, this case does get solved one day. In the meantime, it's very important. We want to let listeners know how they can help if they somehow have information about this case. Who can they contact if they think they know something?
Yeah, there's a tip line. There's a Crime Stoppers tip line in St. Louis. I don't know if that's a nationwide thing, I believe, but it's a Crime Stoppers tip line. It's 1-866-371-8477. And they can just call in, and if they say I have some information on Danny King, something in St. Louis, anything about it, if they mention it, it's totally anonymous. There's a reward, a $5,000 reward with any kind of information leading to an arrest, and so you can go right on there and call it in and just leave a message, and that's the best way to leave any information that goes right to the police, and they'll follow up on it.
Well, let's hope that somebody out there knows something, and we'll be sure to share it on social media as well, and maybe people in that area can also share it and wake up the case a little bit.
Well, great. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the publicity on the case, and any bit will certainly help.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts, so that the show can continue to reach new listeners. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderofmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @murderandmyfam, or by searching the Murder of My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, it's always appreciated, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Murder of My Family. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/The Murder of My Family. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. In this episode, I'd like to thank Shelley and Twyla Chandler. And thanks to all the supporters that generously donate and keep this podcast going. Your support is appreciated and helps the show grow and improve. Until next time, remember, every murder victim means something to somebody.
If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information.